In a world where fanboys can't stop fantasizing about the good old days of gaming and constantly whine about loot boxes, season passes, and the inevitable demise of physical media, one soy boy stands tall in the face.
Hey! Soy boy? Did you think I wouldn't catch that?
What's the problem?
I specifically said I wanted myself referred to as he who does not use aimbots during online first-person shooters because I totally don't. That is a lie, giant cerebrovascular accident 88, and you know it!
Whoa, hey, look. When you said you wanted to help with the hardware retrospective finale for Game Boy, I told you that first script you came up with was way too full of multiplayer jargon and I was gonna have to be the one to clean it up. Don't you remember, EG?
EG? What's that?
That's just what I refer to you as when you're not around.
EG. Oh, I know! It must stand for Elite Gamer. Well, I don't want to brag or anything, but my KD ratio is right up in the...
Not quite, but you are really close. It stands for Entitled Gamer. Yeah, so, I'm just gonna go over here and work on my part of the video, and I'll come back and get you when I need you. Okay, bye! The third and final installment of the Game Boy hardware retrospective has come, and that means it's time to rank these legendary handhelds. So far, we've looked at the advertised selling points and hands-on assessments of the Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Color. This time will be different since we'll be taking one final look that will focus on their pros and cons in direct comparisons. So enough! When it comes to this classic line of systems, let's find the ultimate Game Boy! Starting with third place. It pains me to say this because it's what I grew up with and cut my gaming teeth on, but the original Game Boy can't charm its way out of being objectively the worst one of the trio. Now mind you, it did come out 7 years before the next version was released, and even though it has plenty of factors that will keep it squarely in last place in this contest, it does have a few things going for it that the other better models simply lack.
I really can't get over just how comfortable this model is now that it is over 30 years old. Have you seen electronics from the late 80s? The trend was sharp angles on just about everything, but Nintendo thankfully ignored the trend and made the edges rounded, making the Game Boy probably one of the most comfortable devices to hold from that time, and it still impresses to this day. The slanted design of the buttons allowed the entire full-sized button layout from the NES controller to fit below the screen, despite the width of the Game Boy being less than an NES controller, and these buttons feel just as good. The speaker gets super loud too. Okay, minor rant incoming regarding the volume of Nintendo handhelds, but it has to be said that the puny speakers for the most part are so soft that I have them maxed out all the time. But this honker? It's probably the loudest handheld Nintendo has ever produced. I never played this at max volume because there was no need to, but it's nice to know you have power in reserve when your siblings are having a shouting match on a road trip with you in the middle seat. And then there's the toughness factor. Some of these things have been in some of the worst conditions in the world and have come out the other side still functional. I'm not going to throw mine against the wall to demonstrate, in case you're wondering. No more putting off addressing the pea green elephant in the room. The screen on this thing really is awful. It's blurry, dark, has tons of ghosting. There's really nothing good to be said about it. This was a bad screen even by 80s LCD technology standards, and time has simply made it even worse. It's the worst thing about the Game Boy. This next negative may be seen as nitpicking, but even though this hulk of a Game Boy is one tough cookie, this battery door tab is oddly super easy to break. The original door I had for this broke off the tab probably within the first couple of years that I owned it, and most Game Boys I've seen from the 90s that haven't been refurbished or repaired also have it missing, so it must weaken in a very short amount of time. And finally, while it was very impressive to get hours and hours of gaming out of 4 AA batteries back in the day, the more recent models have the Game Boy beat with only having to use 2. Sure, you can get an AC adapter to hook into, but they weren't widely used and it somewhat defeats the purpose when you're tethered to a wall. Despite having better buttons and a louder speaker than the smaller models, the screen here makes this an easy call to place the Game Boy dead last.
With only 3 models here, we are pretty much already at the end with just 2 competitors to go. Now, while it was a great improvement to the original Game Boy and bragged about its portability in its own name, the Game Boy Pocket only makes it to number 2.
Not only is the black and white screen so much better than the originals, it's actually the largest out of all the classic Game Boys. Being on the smallest body gives this screen the best screen-to-body ratio, a term that probably didn't even exist when this came out in 1996. The Game Boy Pocket, believe it or not, fits in your pocket. I know, right? Honest marketing, who knew such a thing could exist? The small form factor makes this more travel-friendly than before. Being smaller also makes it lighter, and while the original Game Boy wasn't very heavy, this lighter design makes for more comfort during extended play sessions. And wouldn't you know it, the tab on the battery cover feels stronger. It may be because it's not as easy to flex as the originals, but the battery cover feels secure over those AAAs. Actually, the Game Boy Pocket may be too small. The buttons are also smaller now, and they feel stiffer. Couple that with how small this is, and you'll find yourself one intense play session away from hand cramps. The original had meaty pieces of plastic to protect the cartridge, but those are now missing, probably the result of wanting to make the Pocket cheaper and lighter. It's not a huge problem, but since there isn't a sliding tab when the unit turns on anymore to keep the cartridge from coming out, the games do feel less safe than in the previous model. A smaller design means less comfort for larger hands, but overall, the Game Boy Pocket is a solid improvement to the original with a charm all its own.
Was it ever really a question? The Game Boy Color does almost everything better than the other 2 Game Boy models, earning it the top spot and the title of the best Game Boy in the classic line.
The best part about the Game Boy Color is in the name. It not only brings color to all the regular Game Boy games, with 12 different color palettes to choose from, it also has access to well over 100 games not available to the other 2 systems that are in full color. The screen is so good, Nintendo just threw out the contrast wheel since it doesn't need it. The screen looks so good in most lighting situations. It's also the sharpest screen and has the least amount of ghosting. While the Pocket model is smaller by a tad, the Game Boy Color has a hump where the batteries are kept. This makes it more pleasant to hold, adding a nice ergonomic curve to the body. Even though it's slightly bigger than the Pocket, the Color still fits in your pocket with ease. That leaves a lot of space for extra games to have on hand. 2 more factors the Color shares with the Pocket are the strong battery tab and the somewhat exposed cartridge slot. Would it have really killed them to make this like the original Game Boy in this one regard? Since I'm veering off into the negative aspects, let's get those out of the way now. The Start and Select buttons are, for some reason, smaller than the Pocket's Start and Select. There's plenty of room for them, so this is another baffling design choice. And the biggest offender of the Game Boy Color is how low the max volume is of the speaker. If you're around any other kind of noise, you simply won't be able to hear anything out of it. I'd recommend using headphones if you're planning on playing while traveling. It's almost no contest here. With its superior screen, enhancement of all the older games, and access to plenty of exclusive games, there is simply no better classic Game Boy model out there, even when taking into account the few flaws that it has.
That's a wrap on the classic line of Game Boys. I hope you learned a thing or two while watching through this hardware retrospective. I know I certainly learned a few fascinating things while I was going through the research. If you liked this, I have another series that is focused on the 3DS models, and of course there will be definitely more coming centered around Nintendo's other handhelds. This has been the Game Boy Hardware Retrospective by Level 1 Sword, and I'll see...
Change it! You've got to do it all over again!
E.g., what is it now?
I found a way better handheld than the Game Boy. It's got Resident Evil, Sonic, it even has a touchscreen.
Wait! You don't mean
The Gamecom!
No!
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to keep on top of the videos, definitely take a sec to subscribe. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon if you want to follow me across the internet. Level 1 Sword also has a weekly podcast, so give it a listen.